A lot of women fear failure much more than men do, or they don't even know their own value. One of the things I say to the women I mentor is you have to want power. That doesn't make you a megalomaniac. It just means that when you're powerful, you can make good things happen when it's awful being powerless. So don't be scared of power.
Being behind the scenes while affecting change, the key to being an effective and valued chair, to setting up a central marketing agency, to unite the TV companies to work together on a collective mission that they could all share.
When I was asked to set up Thinkbox, I was in my mid-50s and thought I should probably retire. And it just shows you should never say it's too late to do anything. And I'm still, having passed 70, raring to go for the right thing. So
it is never too late. If you want to learn something and learn a new skill, if you want to change industries, change companies.
I tell you what, it's never too late. Even if you don't succeed, you get something out of trying.
Greetings, I'm Ashley Samuels Mackenzie.
And I'm Charles Parkinson.
And welcome to How I Became,
where we unveil the unscripted journeys of inspirational figures.
If you enjoy the show, could you do one thing? Subscribe. Wherever you are, just click the subscribe or follow button. That simple act can help us grow the podcast in a big way, and we need your support to do it. And if you really want to help play a part in our growth, rate us on Spotify or leave a review on Apple Podcasts. It would mean the world. Thank you. This episode is brought to you by Uber, shaping the future for consumers as they go anywhere and get anything. Advertising on Uber connects brands with hundreds of millions of people using Uber around the world in the moments that move them most. To learn more about what we can do for your brand, visit uber.com/advertising.
Hi, I'm Tess Alps, and this is how I became a wise old bird, including being a Channel 4 non-exec.
Starting life in an idyllic community, playing in the streets and seeing how life could be equal and fair. To early passions in singing in theatre, and then into advertising sales, where there wasn't many other women there. To avoid being part of bad practices led her to leave her role to protect her integrity, to founding Thinkbox, a first of its kind for the UK television industry. From satellite to digital TV to the world of streaming platforms, it's clear to hear from her journey that things don't ever stay in just one form. She was last the non-exec director on the board of Channel 4, introducing Tess Alps of many titles, and today she will tell us much more.
Thank you, Ashley.
Welcome.
There we go. That's your life in a poem.
Blimey.
So, yes, this is the story of how a young lady went into the world of performing arts and eventually stopped venturing onto those dreams of being an actress and fell into the world of work and in temping and fell into the world of TV and advertising, thinking you'd eventually find your career, and then find out, oh, actually it is TV and advertising, and you would spend the next few years rising up to the chairperson of PhD, huge agency, and now a non-executive director at Channel 4, along with many other roles, including founding CEO of Thinkbox, which we'll talk all about. And that is what people can learn from your story, is how to rise up to the top of organizations, how to unify an industry like you have with Thinkbox, and how to become a non-executive director one day for large, very influential organizations. And that's what people can learn from your story. And we're also very interested on this show how great businesses are run. So we're looking to unpack with yourself how the organizations you've been at, how they've been run, and what people can learn from that, whether they're in business or they want to run the company they're at better. So that's a little intro. We've got some quick fire questions to get started. I'll hand back to Ash for that.
Quick fire question number 1. What is your favourite business or leadership book?
Well, I'm not a great one for business and leadership books, I'm afraid, but I do take business and leadership lessons from all sorts of books. One is Charles Darwin, Origins of Species, the fact that you have to adapt to survive and to thrive. And my other favourite business book is Nicholas Nickleby by Charles Dickens, which shows, obviously, the oppressions of Victorian society and capitalism going wrong, but also has a wonderful vision of a business that looks after its employees, makes money, but helps everybody in that company, insists that people take holiday. It's the Cheerable Brothers. If you haven't read it, do read Nicholas Nickleby. So I think there are business and leadership lessons in all sorts of things, television, films, songs, and I think they're more fun to read, to be honest, than the average business book.
How interesting. Maybe onto a topic you're more interested in.
What is your favourite fictional book?
Oh, without a doubt, Middlemarch by George Eliot. Because it portrays an entire community and how those people interact with each other, how they depend on each other, how they help each other, how they get in each other's way, how they don't help each other when they should. And of course, it's written by a woman who, in her day, had to take the pseudonym of George Eliot because being called Mary Ann Evans wouldn't have got her published. So I love Middlemarch.
Now might be a good time, actually, to share the fact that you are also an author of a series of fictional books.
Yes.
Would you have the book with you?
I have the book. I have one of the first book. Oh dear, blimey! I wasn't expecting this quite so early, Charles. But
let's do it.
And so you asked me to bring something that meant something to me. So, at the age of whatever it was, my mid-60s, my mum would say, "Finally, your English degree came in useful." So I finally got round to writing some books because, as an absolute world-class prevaricator, it's very easy never to do anything, is it? Never to actually put pen to paper. So, partly as a commemoration of her Irish childhood and her mother. I'm half Irish. I've got an Irish passport. Lucky me. So it's a sort of family saga from 1916 to 1972. It's got slightly pretentiously a trilogy title of the Beethoven trilogy, but I promise you it's not about Beethoven and hardly about music at all. It's just a love story, historical romance, with too much bonking, apparently. My husband says finds it hard to read it. The squelchy bits, of course.
Well, yeah, maybe we'll understand some context around those books later as we get into your story, because I do know that £3 at least from each book goes to charity.
Yes, obviously I wanted to write them in the same way that people play the piano or they paint pictures for their own pleasure. I wanted to write it for my own pleasure, but I thought maybe I could make some money for a charity that's dear to my heart. Because it's in memory of my mother, who died of breast cancer, I thought I'd give all the profit to breast cancer now.
Oh, lovely. Thank you for sharing. We've got a couple of more quick fires.
Next question is, what TV show are you really into at the moment?
Ooh, well, I've just started to watch The Bear, which I watched the first episode with my old man, and we decided it was just too frenetic and too horrendous. But it just shows you just have to stick with stuff. So I've now finished that. I also absolutely adore a comedy series on Channel 4 called Big Boys. I don't know whether it's just about male friendship. There's one gay young guy and his best mate who's as heterosexual as they come, and how they brilliantly sort of look after each other. It's so funny. And it stars, I think he's called Llewellyn something, the guy who was in Derry Girls. The wee English guy. He's
terrible with actors' names.
That's a lot. Big Boys. And obviously, I very much enjoyed and cried at Mr. Bates versus the Post Office on ITV, which is a great example of TV galvanising, catalysing something important in society. So,
which is something you know very much about with Thinkbox, but we'll get to that.
Yep.
I think we've got one more.
And what is your favourite quote?
My favourite quote? Oh, to be honest, it's a sort of mantra. Is it a quote?
Yeah.
But my favourite mantra, I suppose it counts as a quote, is "It's never too late." I believe that so profoundly about everything from, certainly in my own career, it's never too late to do. It's never too late to try and write a book. It's never too late to go to the gym. It's never too late to try and save the planet, or indeed succeed in saving the planet. So when I was asked to set up Thinkbox, I was in my mid-50s and thought I should probably retire. And just shows you should never say it's too late to do anything. And I'm still, having passed 70, raring to go for the right thing. So.
Excellent. Well, speaking of things that you're doing now, one of those is non-executive director at Channel 4. Now, I should say, everybody in the UK will definitely know what Channel 4 is, but 45% of our audience are outside of the UK. And so I'd love to share, for anyone who might not know, what is Channel 4 and what's its significance in the UK?
Channel 4 is a publicly owned but commercially funded TV company. And I say TV in its broader sense. So linear broadcasting, linear digital broadcasting, plus all sorts of streaming, and increasingly presence on social platforms, making short form content. But it has public service obligations. It has a remit to be innovative, to represent underrepresented communities and groups, and to be disruptive. And it gets into a lot of trouble, but frankly, that is its job, I think. So it's a very precious cultural phenomenon. I mean, it's also a very precious commercial phenomenon. So for brands, it delivers audiences that are hard to reach in any sort of quantity on any other equivalent brand-safe channel. And one of the key things about it from its launch in 1982 is that it doesn't make its own programmes. So it has, Channel 4, I'd say largely has been responsible for the enormous growth in the independent production sector in the UK, the thriving sector, which now makes so many programmes for American channels and American, HBO. A lot of those things are made by British production companies. That is about to change possibly with the media bill. So Channel 4 is being given possibly the chance to make its own programmes and own some IP.
Which previously it wasn't allowed to do.
Previously it was not allowed to do. It's not something it asked for.
Yeah.
But I think in terms of guaranteeing it's a sustainable future for Channel 4, the value of the spectrum, so Channel 4 and ITV and Channel 5, who are public service broadcasters, are gifted the spectrum. But of course, broadcasting spectrum is increasingly not unvaluable, but less valuable than it was. So if you want public service broadcasts to keep doing the things that society wants them to do, quality news, important documentaries, representing all parts of the UK, then you have to give them something back in return. So it's possible that Channel 4 will start thinking about owning its own IP. It'll probably start very small, and I urge you to go and read Alex Mahon's speech on the subject. She's obviously, as the chief exec of Channel 4, far more reliable a source than me.
Excellent. And what's fascinating is it has gone from a time where there were 4 TV channels on the TV at that point.
Yep. Yeah.
And obviously now there's
coming down a little bit actually, but still over 400 linear channels. We call the thing with a schedule that's got a time. You can look in the Radio Times, as I still do because I'm that old, that has a broadcast time. But of course, increasingly people watch on demand in all sorts of ways. They record stuff still, and they stream it if they can download it and or stream it. So I remember when Thinkbox was set up in 2006, and I decided to go for it. I had lots of interviews, and I'm pleased to say I read a couple of them the other day, and I thought I was sort of quite pleased because at that time everybody was saying the internet was going to kill TV, and I didn't believe that was true. I mean, I actually said in interviews, far from killing TV, the internet is going to be one of the most valuable ways TV will get to people. And I think that's proving to be true. So
excellent. So that's what Channel 4 is, for anyone who doesn't know, outside the UK. Now let's step into your story. That's the story of Channel 4. Step into your story. Take it away.
So you had a really unique upbringing. Could you share a bit about what your earlier years were like?
Yes, it was. I mean, we all have rose-tinted spectacles, but I honestly can't think of anything bad about the first, 18 years of my life. Until I was 10, my parents both worked in a high-security psychiatric hospital, and we lived in the estate around the hospital. So it was a very, very equal and blissful place because everybody lived in a similar size house. Everybody knew everybody else. There was no traffic. We had a big sports field. We had a swimming pool, tennis courts. We had Saturday cinema in the hospital. All the kids would go along and watch films. And it was just an unbelievably cohesive community. And I suppose my belief in community goes very deep. I mean, I really believe in it. And I live in a village now, and I still see that sense of community working. No old person is alone in our village. Nobody's goes without food in our village. So yeah, it was a brilliant childhood. My mum and dad. It was a high security hospital with psychopathic murderers in it. But back to talk about the 50s now. Back then, there were people with Down syndrome there, people with clinical depression, people who would never, ever be in such a place anymore. So, in fact, there were a lot of patients there who were perfectly safe to be interacting with the community. And indeed, they would be the people who emptied the bins. They did all the hedge cutting around the estate. And my mum and dad would have some of them home for tea. So my mum and dad have always been champions of the underdog, and that's rubbed off a lot on me, I think.
So you would have tea with potentially ex-murderers?
No, they would be the dangerous people.
I was going to say.
I'm saying that there were lots of people who, it's a dreadful phrase, but you used to call them low-grade patients. They meant low-grade danger.
I see.
The people, as I say, so there were psychopathic murderers, but there were also people with just mental illnesses who were not at all dangerous. And those people, thankfully, did play a role in the community. And my mum and dad would have them around for tea because they were very soft and sweet.
Lovely. Well, definitely, and we'll hear it here later, definitely had an impact on your values. Tell us where this love for drama began.
Oh, that my wonderful English teacher called Bob Helen, who recently died, although I kept in touch with him in his mid-80s. I realise now he was hardly that, wasn't that much older than me, but he felt like a very, very grown-up person.
Yeah.
Gave me my absolute love for literature generally and drama, and he would direct plays. Even though it was a girls-only school, we sort of matched up with the boys' grammar school, and we put on wonderful plays. And he's the reason I went to university and read English. And then when I spent all my time at university messing about in theatres and directing operas and directing plays and acting and singing. And then when I graduated, I thought I joined a sort of theatre and education group, and I stayed up in the Northeast for a year in this theatre group, and we had an absolutely marvellous time writing our own plays for schools. It might be anything from Chinese legends like Monkey, we dramatised them for secondary schools, or even for little tiny tots, we'd do things about the colour circle. We sort of humanise the colours, and we'd take Shakespeare into Concert Miners Club or Restoration Comedy, and you know what? They loved it. Because why wouldn't you? The idea that working class people can't appreciate quality stuff is just rubbish, isn't it? So anyway, so I loved that year, and I thought, oh right, and I was about to get married at a very young age.
How old were you?
I was 21 when we sort of got engaged. I was just 22 when we got married, but I thought I'm going to go and learn how to be an actress properly, and got myself a postgrad place at a London theatre school, and it was an absolutely disastrous. I won't swear. I'll try very hard not to swear today. It was a toilet. It was just so cynical. I'm not going to name them because they're a very different organisation. They're very much improved. It was just a money-making racket, and it was very much, do you fit this stereotype? Do you fit that stereotype? Oh, girls don't expect to get any roles because there are no roles for women in the theatre. So just all the joy I'd had performing in community theatre was sort of destroyed and quenched that fire. At a stroke. So that's how I then ended up thinking, what the hell am I going to do? And ended up doing temporary filing clerk at ATV, and there my advertising career began.
I see. It's quite interesting because we had Charithra Chandran, who was Edwina on Bridgerton, on the show recently.
Yeah.
And you've done opposite things. She went on the corporate career.
Did she?
And almost went got a job or had a job offer at BCG and decided to give it a last-ditch chance at acting and became an actress. You ditching acting, performing, and went on to achieve amazing things in your career. Performing now.
Exactly. I think, certainly advertising sales gives you a reasonable stage to perform on. So.
Well, I want to talk about that. So you get this temp job, and then where was the temp job?
It was at ATV, which was the ITV company that looked after what's now called the Central region. Mm-hmm. And it was run by a guy who was very famous in his day called Sir Lou Grade, Sir Lord Michael Grade's uncle.
Right.
And Sir Lou Grade would phone up every afternoon saying what the sales figures were, and occasionally you'd pick up the phone to Sir Lou Grade and give him the daily sales figure. So I certainly didn't. I started off as a filing clerk and got persuaded to move into sales, but didn't really think I was going to stay in advertising for very long, and didn't think I really approved of advertising. I was an absolute classic hippie. But a few years later, having been promoted a bit and changed companies and started earning reasonable money, I thought, well, actually, it's okay. Mm-hmm. It's okay. It's actually quite interesting. And actually, I managed to rationalise to myself that it did a lot of good, and people even now, because I'm a member of the Labour Party, quite famously in the ad industry, there are more than you think, and people think it's a bit weird that you'd be in advertising. And I say, no, brands do a lot better when more people have more money, when money's spread around more equally. Mm-hmm. Actually, it's much better for brands than let a few people have all the money that they take off to the Cayman Islands. Mm. So, yeah. Anyway, so I managed to rationalise to myself that it was a perfectly honourable and ethical thing to do. And it also paid for the Financial Times, and it paid for The Guardian, and it paid for Channel 4, and it paid for, the advertising money absolutely supports the media sector. So.
Yes. So, yes, it's supporting the creative and the arts, really.
Absolutely. I mean, I've got lots of actor friends. They say they couldn't do the month at the National unless they got paid to do that, those couple of ads. Actually, it's amazing how advertising does subsidise so many bits of the creative world, music, etc.
So you were at ITV for 15 years.
Yes.
And in that time, you rose up to sales director?
Yes, obviously back then ITV was organised in regional franchises. So, and I worked for ATV, which is the central bit, then worked for Television South West, and latterly worked for Yorkshire and Tyne Tees, which is where I became a sales director. And there were no other women it was very, very much a sort of boys' club, which at the time didn't seem strange to me. But I certainly didn't want to be a sales director like all those other guys who had chauffeurs and debentures at Twickenham and Lord's. I did it in my way. And I think I started to have ambition in the mid-'80s. It was sort of thinking, well, I'm not sure I want to be a sales director, but bloody hell, I think I'm just as good as those blokes, so I may as well have a go,
How did you navigate that environment? So you're sure on what you want to do. You've got all other male counterparts. How did you navigate that? How did you keep your individuality in a scenario such as that?
Well, I made a case to. I mean, I owe a lot to two brilliant blokes. One, Harry Turner, who was the managing director of Television South West, and a guy called Craig Pearman, who employed me at Yorkshire Tyne Tees Television. So I love men just as much as I love women, and those two men had faith in me, really, and I made a case to them. And I say to a lot of women, have you asked for it? A lot of women just don't bother to ask, or they don't even know their own value or their own worth.
Ask for what?
Ask for the chance to prove that you could do something. And a lot of women fear failure much more than men do. I think women are less so, obviously, these days. I'm talking, 40 years ago. Women back then were absolutely terrified to take responsibility, to take power. And I, one of the things I say to the women I mentor is, you have to want power. That doesn't make you a megalomaniac. It just means that when you're powerful, you can make good things happen. When it's awful being powerless.
Mm.
You know, imagine being powerless. That's really crap, isn't it? So, and if you're powerful, it's your responsibility to use it in the right way. So don't be scared of power.
I love that. And what did you learn about sales during this time? You're obviously very good at it. You got to such a senior role. But yeah, what did you learn about it?
Well, you see, I think sales gets a bad rap. It's almost entirely not what you think it is. It's largely about listening, I think. And I don't think you can sell anything to anybody, certainly not in a consistent way. You can't sell anything to somebody for a second time unless you sell them something that is really valuable to them, that they need. So if you listen properly, then you will ascertain what their company needs, what they need as a human being. And then hopefully you try and match what you have. Sometimes you can't. And I think good salespeople often say, look, what I've got is not for you. Come back in 2 years, maybe when you're a bit bigger, or whatever it is. But if you listen properly, then you shouldn't have a sort of set script that you start to. There are the people who do cold telephone calling who drive you mad, and you think, oh, Jesus, stop talking. I don't need double glazing. Thank you very much. That's the worst sort of selling. So selling to me is, people need things, physical things, but soft things too. And if you listen well, then you'll be able to hopefully match what you've got to what they need.
Well, regular listeners will have heard in Karen Blackett's episode, which came out recently, that she said you've got 2 ears and 1 mouth. Use them in that proportion.
That's
was her advice from her dad, actually. So I'm very
line.
much in line
Certainly,
with that.
I think it's everybody's selling something. Karen Blackett is an absolutely consummate salesperson because she's selling ideas and she's selling her company and. She's an absolutely fabulous person, but we're all salespeople in a way, aren't we?
Yes, that's it. If you're applying,
self-title or not,
that's it. Even you whether it's going for a job, you're selling yourself in the interview.
So politicians, that's all they're doing, selling ideas.
Yes, or if you want to go on holiday and you're trying to ask your partner whether you should go to, wherever, you're trying to sell.
That's negotiation, which is slightly different.
True. Yes. Well, people have been known to do PowerPoint pitch presentations of where they should go on holiday.
Have they really? Gosh,
yes.
Yeah. No, persuasive communications. Yeah, it takes all sorts of forms. But yeah, I think Harry Turner, my old boss, used to say, salespeople run the world. And in a very weird way, I think he might have a point. Politicians are trying to sell us something. Hopefully something good, and that's good for us, but
not always is the case. Yeah.
So you're a sales director. Everyone would think, wow, you've got everything you could want. You could have a chauffeur if you want. You can sit at the front row of many different sporting arenas.
Yep.
But something in yourself said, I'd like to do something different, right?
Well, two things happened. One is Craig Pearman, who was my direct boss, he was the managing director of the whole unit, was an angel and just wonderful, and who died far too early in his mid-50s. But he was pressurised to adopt certain policies that I didn't agree with, that I felt very uncomfortable with, and felt I should leave. I certainly didn't want to whistle blow or do anything like that. And I didn't want to damage Craig in any way, who'd given me so much. But I sort of wanted to leave. But I was also getting a bit bored because I felt I knew lots about telly, but I could see that telly wasn't the only medium, obviously. And I sort of had a great desire to understand how television fitted into the entire media landscape. And I was getting very close to some people in media agencies who were planners and strategists, and that side interested me. So that's why I decided, much to the amazement of some people who thought, why would you give up this amazing job with, loads of money and all sorts of benefits, and go and start possibly move backwards? I mean, yes, I think people did. Yeah, I certainly earned less money, and go and move to the other side of the fence and join a media agency, which is what I did in early 1993, and left Yorkshire TV and joined PhD, which was a 2-year-old media independent. So as their broadcast director, so I went in with a sort of TV specialism as their first non-founder director, but then very, very quickly sort of got to learn about all media, and I love all sorts of media, and always have done. Nothing's quite as good as television, I have to tell you. But that was fantastic. I mean, keep learning. That my mantra of "it's never too late" is never too late to learn about SEO. It's never too late to learn about AI. Keep learning, and keeping learning through those 13 years at PhD was very joyful and just brilliant fun. Just working with big brands, BT and Sainsbury's and HSBC, doing wonderful work. I treasure those years.
Around this time, you're married with your husband.
Yep.
And when did you start to have conversations whether you wanted children or not?
Yes. We got married in 1976. And I'm still married to him, so sort of 48 years later. Amazing.
Wow.
I can't believe it.
Congratulations.
Almost a half a century.
That's amazing.
I know. It's outrageous, I think. But anyway, he's a very, very lovely man, and obviously very tolerant to have coped with me all this time. I think, do you know what? We were having such a brilliant time. We were having, just aware of, he's a musician, so nothing to do with marketing and advertising. And we had a very rich life, a musical life and a social life, and had, we were earning enough money to have fabulous holidays and, dining out. I always say this is a 5-star Michelin arse. This is not your McDonald's arse. This is a very classic arse. Anyway, so we were having a most brilliant time. And plus, you might remember, you won't remember because you weren't born, but the 1980s was very much Margaret Thatcher's era. Uh-huh. And we were both being hippies, didn't like her very much. And we said, I really don't want to have a child born into this environment. So it sort of time went on and we forgot about it really until in 1990 my mother died. And my mother dying sparked a lot of things, sort of trauma in my life in various ways. My dad had died 5 years before, but when the first parent dies, I don't know if you've got your parents still, but when the first parent dies, you're very busy trying to keep the other parent going, trying to not let them get too depressed. So that when the second one dies, really you're grieving for both of them. You're allowed to grieve for both of them. So in 1990, my mother died, and I was hit very badly with grief, which I hope these days we give people more time to grieve. But I think I'm not blaming anybody for it. It was just the culture of the times that we didn't give people time to grieve properly. But I remember crying every day, serious sobbing for about 2 years.
Wow.
Yeah.
So you would really sob for
really
every day for 2 years.
Yeah, just missing my mum and dad and all the things that I hadn't, the regrets that I wish I'd spent more time with them. I wish I'd said that. All the things that we now hopefully tell ourselves to do earlier while you've still got them, I hope I wasn't an awful child, but I rather depended. I had a sister who was 10 years older than me, and she, I think, bore the brunt of looking after them, and I wish I'd done more. So, but her dying, or them dying, made me think, gosh, one way I could commemorate her would be to have a child. She's brought me up, maybe I can, it's a way of giving her a bit of immortality is to have a child. But I was sort of 37, 38 by the time she died. So getting on a bit, really, to try and... but we got down to it,
Do you think she would have been happy to hear that you were having a child?
Absolutely beside herself with joy. Seriously. She spent most of my 20s and 30s telling me, Tess, do you know how she was Irish, so, do you know how happy you make me? Well, will you not have a child yourself? Sort of thing. And, oh, Mum, shut up. So that, as you do.
Yeah.
So yes, she would be. And sadly, I have no faith, although I was brought up a Catholic. I'd love to think she was looking down at me and thinking, well done, girl, you came round to the right decision. But, so we got pregnant very easily, but we suffered, three miscarriages and then a stillbirth. And so thought that was really, we thought we were quite privileged to have sort of got pregnant and seen a baby at all, and thought there's no way we're ever going to have, because I was now 40, I think. But this amazing, I was lying in the bed after the miscarriage, after the stillbirth, and this amazing woman came to see me, and she said, I'm really sorry, I think I know what's wrong with you. Come and see me when you're better. And this was a woman who's now the czar, as they call them, for women's health in the UK, Dame Professor Leslie Regan.
Wow.
She happened to be the Professor of Obstetrics and Gynecology
Wow.
at St Mary's. And, I mean, she just said, I know what's wrong with you. You just take a quarter of an aspirin a day. And that was it. It was
Really?
miraculous. And lo and behold, we got pregnant, and I got through to 38 weeks before getting preeclampsia again. And at the age of 41, had this amazing, beautiful human being
Wow.
called Tom, who was 28 and a data scientist. So there you go, you can't win them all. No, he's a glorious human being. And I mean, he's, the best thing about my life, completely.
If you can go back to the day Tom was born, what do you remember about that?
Well, I remember being bloody relieved that he had been born, because I had the reason I got the stillbirth was I got preeclampsia at 26 weeks. So you don't know what preeclampsia.
No.
Preeclampsia is one of those great risks of, a lot of maternal deaths are caused by. Basically, your body shuts down all its arteries and veins because it's trying to get rid of this thing. It's basically an overreaction of your autoimmune system. So it's like your body doesn't want to have this thing inside you. And the thing the aspirin does is dilates your veins and arteries to keep the vessels inside your uterus
I see.
open.
Right.
But you start, as you get preeclampsia, you start to feel iller and iller. You actually feel like you're going to die.
Oh no.
Yeah. I mean, certainly before the stillbirth, I really did think I was going to die.
Oh my gosh.
And, yeah, you realise, looking back, it was because they try and keep you going for as long as possible to see whether the baby might have a chance of life. But anyway, so yeah, I felt
sorry,
great.
just on that, are you in hospital feeling like this might be it? You might not survive.
Yeah. So I was taken into hospital, I think, for the stillbirth at 23 weeks, and they sort of keep you going. They try and cook the baby for a bit longer, as they say, try and get its lungs to develop. But eventually they have to make you give birth, otherwise you're going to die.
Wow,
So you are you feel, yeah.
And how many weeks did they make
So
you to have
26.
birth?
I got to 26
weeks.
He was,
Right.
another little boy called
Wow.
perfect little baby boy. So, but it's a happy story in the end because we got Tom. So, in fact, Professor Regan has got lots of photographs on her office wall, and Tom Alps is one of them.
Mm-hmm.
But we've got photographs of our own little baby who didn't make it,
Oh.
and think what might have been, and obviously because of being quite ill, even with Tom's birth, and I was 41, I think we decided we'd sort of pushed our luck really, and not to try and have another one.
There was a moment you shared with us before this of looking at the hands that was really touching.
Yes, that was talking about grief. Yeah, so when we had the stillbirth, they give you the baby, and it's a perfect baby, small, 3 pounds or whatever, and you sit with the baby. And my husband said, "Oh God, look, his thumb is just like my dad's thumb." Because the previous miscarriages were sort of theoretical babies. We never saw them. They were just a group of cells sort of thing.
Mm.
Whereas the stillborn baby was a real baby. And then when Tom was born and he didn't have his granddad's thumb, we both completely lost it and thought, what we'd lost with the stillborn baby, that he had been a unique, potentially a unique human being who never saw the light of day. But we, that sort of grief. I mean, I went back to work full time after 11 weeks after Tom was born. And again, I think I would never do that. You would never. And that's not to blame anybody. PhD were brilliant. That's where I was when Tom was born in 94. You just wouldn't let anybody come back to work after 11 weeks, giving birth. And particularly hitting again, this sort of delayed grief. Like my parents, I didn't mourn my dad properly until 5 years after he died. The same was true about our stillborn baby. But it is a happy story because Tom is wonderful and beautiful and gives us great joy.
I'm sure, absolutely.
There's often a silence around miscarriages and stillbirth. And
there certainly was then.
Yeah.
Yes, I mean, people said, I'm really sorry, but we didn't talk about it much either. So in a way, you can't blame the people because we didn't feel the permission to talk about it. It's much, much better now. Certainly, Channel 4 has got fantastic policies around all sorts of things to do with fertility for both men and women. So they support people through their search for fertility, and certainly through birth and post-birth, and certainly miscarriage, which men feel very deeply too. It's not just women. And of course, then menopause, which is now becoming much more understood as being quite traumatic for women. Although I personally didn't suffer, but I know lots of people who have terrible menopauses. So.
And what would be your advice to couples who have gone through a miscarriage or a stillbirth?
I would advise them to get professional counselling, which we didn't do, and I think it was offered to us, and we possibly arrogantly thought we could look after each other, and we were pretty good at supporting each other. But I think maybe we'd have recovered a lot better had we taken some professional counselling. So, if it's there, or go seek it out, because you'll get better faster.
Thank you for sharing.
You would join PhD, as we've shared, in 1993. By 2003, you would be chairperson of this organisation. So looking back, so people can learn from your ascent to becoming chair of a very large, very influential media agency. What did you do during your time at PhD that got you into the position of rising up the company and becoming chairperson, so people can learn?
Well, PhD was founded by P.H.D., Patterson, Horswell and Durden, who were three good friends who had different skills and abilities, and they set up the company in 1990 in the face of a great recession, and just at the time that Zenith was launching. Zenith is a very, very large media agency. Back then, it was set up as a media buying agency, and its philosophy was all about bulk and volume and sort of discount. And, it's now part of Publicis and is a very different beast. And it was a very excellent agency of its type. And PhD basically set itself up to be the direct opposite of that. So if Zenith was about power and volume and sort of heft, PhD was all about strategy and planning and clever thinking, and that appealed hugely to me. But mainly I wanted to go and work with my friends. So certainly the P and the D were very close friends of mine, and H I loved too. I quite fancied him, actually. No, he knows it, so don't worry. But they were, so it's a bit like family, and it was a very family type culture. And they believed in the concept of intrapreneurship, if you like. So allowing people with a brilliant idea to set up a new specialism within that group. And I was lucky they let me set up the thing called Drum, which specialised in, and we had we were one of the first to set up an econometrics division, the very first major media agency to specialise in search, And so it was that sort of culture, really. It was sort of an enabling culture. It was a why not? And amazingly, it attracted the very best accounts, I think. We often called ourselves the doctor's doctor because we had the cream of media brands as our clients. So the Guardian, Observer, The Economist, the BBC, UK TV, Capital. So we felt that if you knew about media, then as media organisations ought to, and they chose us, that was a hell of a vindication. So the very first client of PhD was the Guardian, and it is still a client of theirs. It's very much like the Ravens and the Tower of London. I think if the Guardian ever left PhD, there's something odd. But so it sort of encouraged challenging work, but effective work. It wasn't just about gimmicks or fashion. I think there's a great difference between fashion, which we see a lot in media and advertising, and innovation. Innovation, I think, is purposeful, is looking for something better. PhD came up with a line for itself, which was sort of pioneering. And pioneers, which might mean covered wagons out in the Wild West to you, but pioneers believe there is a better way, and they're always looking for a better way. So it's not fashion. It's not just change for the sake of change. You're always looking to measure that innovation. What is it changed? And we were lucky enough to have brilliant brands who wanted to do that journey with us.
And just briefly, for anybody who's not in the world of advertising, could you briefly explain what a media agency is and what it does?
Right. So the media agency, they are the people, very, very crudely, who place advertising. And so they end up spending the money. But the real skills are in planning how you take that message, and often, and increasingly so, deciding what medium and what mix of media might best suit that brand and that project can affect the creative work. It can go that way around.
So saying, for example, we think you should have a 30-second TV ads, and they should be here, and you should have radio ads, and you should have some posters somewhere.
That would be the plan. You'd end up with a plan like that. But before that, you might have a strategy. And the strategy might be, this brand should be all about surprise or instant gratification, and therefore that might have then informed the ad agency who will make creative work to fit that.
Yes.
And then you find media placements that, fit with surprise, as well as the sort of soft metrics, as well as the hard metrics of reaching enough people in your, at the right price. You've got to do all that basic hygiene as well.
Yes.
But they're the people with a lot of money. So Karen Blackett runs, or did, and I think she still is,
UK president of WPP.
President of WPP, but she did run
Group M,
and before that Mediacom, the
Yes.
biggest billings. So she's an expert in that field.
Yeah, of over
in fact,
billion.
Mediacom were very much PhD's great rivals in the 90s and early 2000s.
Okay. And again, a very crude example is the creative agencies will go out and film the advert if that's what they're doing, and then.
Well, funnily enough, they don't even.
Well,
That'll be a production company like yours. I think. So they'll come up with the ideas. They come up with the creative idea,
and they'll get it done.
Or I mean, my favourite example of a creative strategy is Dirt is Good. Purcell's Dirt is Good is an absolutely brilliant strategy, and out of that come a million creative executions.
And then the media agency will help to decide which spots to put it in and where to put it and everything.
Yeah.
So you're on this rise up this organisation. How can people learn from your journey, to chairperson? How do you do it?
The learning thing is important. So because media was changing fantastically fast and still is, and maybe the pace of change is even increasing. So keeping up to speed, being prepared to say, I don't know anything about blip, and taking yourself off, not being too important, say, I can't go on a training course about that thing. You must keep learning.
At any age as well.
At any age.
Yeah.
I mean, say right now, I want to know I want to know more about AI, specifically the good bits. I've got it. I was in the 90s. I think I would consider myself an internet evangelist. Well, I probably was. And funnily enough, I think H&D were a bit more sceptical about it. But what you want are all the good bits. You want to know enough. So you want to get the good bits out of change and avoid as many of the bad bits. And I think that's where we didn't get it quite right with the internet. I'm still a massive, massive fan. But I feel we've lost the plot on a few issues. And I hope it's not too late to go back and make those right. And the other thing is that, leadership is a funny thing, but I was not, although I might have had a title of chair, there were people there who didn't want to have titles, but they were just as important. I think the other thing is not to be too hierarchical about this. Actually, the concept of PhD as a partnership of equally important but differently skilled people is something I believe in. In the end, it's always about the team. I mean, that was absolutely true at PhD, absolutely true at Thinkbox. And I see it now at Channel 4 that somebody might have to have a responsibility, but it doesn't mean you're the most important person. And recognising and valuing difference is a key part of that.
And so eventually you do become chairperson, you were deputy chair and then chair. What makes a great chair of an organisation? So people who may have aspirations to get there, or maybe a chairperson that is at this present moment can learn from that. Well,
chairs as opposed to CEOs. I think CEOs carry a lot of responsibility, and chairs, classic chairs who have boards that comprise executive directors and non-executive directors, are there to sort of make the chemistry work and to get the ingredients, get the eggs, get the olive oil, and they have to make the mayonnaise sort of thing. So ensuring the chemistry works well. There's a certain amount of due governance required. But a chair, I would say, is not responsible for, in the way that the CEO is responsible for setting the vision. Obviously, they shape and input into it. They're a supporter and cheerleader of the CEO. My view is that chairs should have little ambition for themselves, but they should have massive ambition for the organisation. I think chairs should be beyond, their own career. They're sort of past that, really.
I see.
But they're there to make sure that the organisation is, the engine's running smoothly, and that if it needs a bit of that and a bit of that and a bit of oil into that joint, you make sure it happens. And recruitment, but broadly, you're there to support, cheerlead, and sort it out when it goes wrong. Certainly to find the next CEO, which is succession management, is a big part of being a chair.
And is that something you did at PhD, and how did you do it in the succession planning side?
One tiny reason I left, not a reason I left at all. I was mostly excited to do the Thinkbox thing. But I was able to leave without any great worries because I knew there was a fantastic group of people there ready to take over and to do well and to do much better than me at the job. So it makes it very easy to move on if you've got the right people.
Was that orchestrated though? Did you have
it was
that
conscious,
as the plan?
It was very conscious, yes.
How did you do that?
We had sort of 3 people. We'd sort of put a hand on the shoulder and said, you're going to be the future leaders of this organisation. And one of them is still there in the global organisation.
Who's that?
Mark Holden.
Okay.
He's the global head of strategy. So
I see.
Yeah.
Wow. And so do you think that's important to do as that sort of leadership team to at some point let those people know that your vision is for them to run the company one day?
I do, very much so.
At what stage? When's too early? When's too late?
Well, you can do it too early. I mean, you can, and you think, oh God,
it's gone to their head.
I shouldn't have put my hand on her shoulder for another 3 years because I'm not quite ready to go.
Oh, I see. Right, because they're now chomping at the bit to come
get
in.
Get off. It's my turn now. Not seriously, but
Yeah.
there's a good time, and also a time when they're ready. But if you don't do it, you might lose that person. So
Yeah.
if they don't, because they're obviously going to be extremely talented. So it's a way of giving the signal that there's a great future for them in a couple of years' time. Otherwise, in fact, funnily enough, a few years before that, we had given a group of 3 guys a sort of sign that we wanted them to take over. And it was a little bit too late. And they'd already made plans, I think, to set up on their own. They launched something called Naked. You heard of Naked?
Yes.
Yeah.
A very successful planning-only agency. So we'd sort of done it a bit too late for those people.
Right. Do you always do it in groups? Do you sort of see a team that work well together and say, let's...
Absolutely not always. No,
No.
I mean, I think it's different in a media agency because there are some very defined roles. You need somebody in the way that H&D represented, account management, quality control, finance, and creative planning. You need that spread of talent, really. It's a bit different in other organisations. You might only be looking for one CEO. Although even then you need a spread of talent sort of beneath that person.
And then once you've given someone the notification that you could be up next, we see something in you, how do you kind of nurture them and mentor them for the next level?
Well, you have to obviously agree with them what they're going to take over. You have to give them something to work on, to flex the muscles. But you have to be on standby to help them out when they need to refer to you. So it's a very fluid, organic. And sometimes somebody who you might have chosen gets a year into it and thinks, no, I don't want this. This is not right for me, and that's fine. They move on and do something else.
What was your approach to briefing them on, like, how much do you give them? How much do you give them free rein to come up with? Was there anything that worked well in?
Well, I think obviously you have an assessment of that individual. There's no blanket rule. I think some people are readier faster. Some people resent actually having you looking over their shoulder too much, and so you let them think, fine, you want to do it that way. When you cock up, that's fine. Just come and see me,
I'll
and
be here waiting.
we'll sort it out. But it's okay. I think Mark Holden used to talk about it. You old lot who are called, Dave Passon was the global chief exec then, and I was the chair. You're the goalkeeper, and you're the Virgil van Dijk. So just stay back. We're going to be doing all the striking, and occasionally you might have to come up and take a penalty, or come up for a corner, and you might be able to get a fabulous goal. But generally, just stay back.
Stay back in defence. Wow, what an analogy. Love that.
How do you foster a culture of open dialogue and constructiveness within the boardroom?
Well, I have to say that open dialogue is a requirement of a board, and it's certainly a requirement of a proper NED on any sort of publicly responsible company, and certainly a PLC, that it is the requirement of non-executive directors to raise issues in a spirit of, we're all in this for one purpose. We all believe in the purpose of making this organisation fly and sing. So there are ways of doing it, obviously, without being too recriminatory. Sometimes you can't avoid but say this went wrong. But things go wrong in all companies all the time. It is about how you approach failure and how you avoid it happening again. And, it's a cliche, I know, but failures are the way you learn. So if boards don't point out failures, then they're not helping that organisation learn, really. So, trying to depersonalise when a decision has been made that wasn't ideal is the way you do it, preferably, because it's very rare that a single person has been actually responsible for something going wrong. It's often a chain of events and discussions that have made the executive team go the wrong way.
Mhm.
But yeah, openness, non-recrimination, learning, moving on. But don't do it again.
And what strategies did you employ to ensure that the board's decisions were aligned with the long-term goals of the organisation?
Oh, it's an interesting one, isn't it? Basically, you have to, if you haven't got long-term goals, and I come across lots of companies where they haven't actually got long-term goals. And that is, from brands to agencies to media owners. If you haven't, everybody's got short-term goals because you have to have short-term goals because you've got to get through the next week, the next month.
Mm-hmm.
But if you let those short-term goals cloud everything and just make them your sole focus, you won't probably be thriving in 5 years' time. So that balance of short, long-term goals is absolutely crucial in terms of your business strategy.
And how do you define the long-term goals?
Well, you need to
As
have
in, sorry,
written a 5-10 year plan.
5 and 10 years is what you mean for long
Probably
term.
going beyond that is, you might want to say we want to rule the world in 50 years' time, but that's obviously nonsense. But 10 years probably is as long as you can reasonably, identify a landscape in which you can operate. But yes, if you haven't got 5-year goals, then you will almost certainly miss them, because the present day is always too hungry, too demanding. It will take all your time and energy if you let it. And, the balance between the important and the urgent. The urgent has to be looked at, but not to the detriment of the important. And the concept of investment, and investment is not just infrastructure and sort of hardware, it's investment in people. I could go back to Liverpool, but, investment in the Liverpool Academy. I don't know whether you watch football at all, but
Yeah.
there are amazing young Liverpool players who come out of the academy, and that's investment in talent. And because of them, they're going to save millions of pounds in the transfer market. The young Conor Bradley, who's an absolute hero, age 20, they haven't had to buy him for millions of pounds. It's that sort of investment. That you can see 5 and 10 years out. But it takes money, it takes time, energy to invest when you're not going to get an immediate return. But it's one of the great duties of executives teams is to make sure the company you're running is going to be healthy in 5 and 10 years' time. I see brands being run by marketing directors who are only in it for 18 months. They come in and score a couple of hits, trash their brand, and they bugger off to do it to some other poor brand.
Short-term thinking. Or selfish.
Yeah.
Very selfish.
How important do you believe a chairman's role in stakeholder engagement, including shareholders, employees and clients?
Yes, well, chair people are communicators, but I don't think they should take the limelight. I would say a chair operates more behind the scenes. Occasionally it's really important for a chair to stand up on a platform and enthuse the entire organisation. But I don't like chairs taking the limelight, as I say, from CEOs. It's the chair's job to make the CEO the star, in my opinion. But there are occasions, particularly, say, talking to investor stakeholders, political stakeholders, where a chair's role can be expanded, and it's easier for them to do it often than the CEO.
So that is your experience as chairperson at PhD. It doesn't end there, the story. We're still continuing on.
I'm very old.
It's 1998, and I think you get what is your first board member role of an external organisation.
Yes.
Advisory board member at Edinburgh TV Festival.
Oh, yes.
And you would also, in 1999, become board member at editorial advisory board for BBC magazines.
Yes.
So for someone who's in a senior role who might like to one day get on boards of external organisations, or for someone who's currently a board member, can you share from your experience, how did that first one come about? Were you actively looking for them, and how did you get it, and what was it like?
I wasn't actively looking for the first one. And I don't think I was actively looking for the BBC Magazine's one, though looking back, I should have been, I think when you're at that stage of your career, you should be trying to find some non-executive roles on other organisations, because you will learn so much and you will bring a lot back to your main company.
And when you say at that stage of your career, what do you mean in terms?
Well, I mean, where you've sort of reached a very senior level,
right,
in a full-time job, but your company, if it's wise, will let you have the time to take on a few other non-exec roles. And I was lucky that PhD was happy. The Edinburgh TV Festival was a relatively easy one because, it was TV. And it was sort of intense for 3 months of the year. And not so much. I did it for a lot of years. And it was fantastic fun, obviously. BBC Magazines was more onerous, much more rigorous, because this was very much the era when the BBC was deciding to sell some of its titles, and the sort of balance of selling titles, finding who they should sell to, finding an owner who would respect the BBC brand that was still going to be on that title, and coming up with the rules that would make sure that the BBC's name and reputation wasn't going to be damaged in any way, was quite an onerous task, actually.
And when you say title, what do you mean?
The title of them, so there's a huge range of BBC History Magazine, Radio Times, Gardener's World magazine.
Sort of selling these off, right?
Not all of them. There are some of them.
Yeah.
It was about looking for a potential owner who would respect those brands and not damage the BBC, even though they were externally owned. So Gardener's World is owned by Immediate Media, but it's a huge BBC brand. So that gives Immediate Media great access to Gardener's World editorial, and they have a lot of the people who appear on the show writing in the magazine, but it's not owned by the BBC any longer. So, but it's got the BBC brand on it. So that that sort of guardianship of the BBC brand, when you sell a media property, how do you keep that safe? It's quite an interesting task.
And what makes a great board member then, for if you're an external person on the board?
Well, I think in my case they were obviously interested in advertising expertise, but also understanding the media market generally, and understanding who potential purchasers might be, what safeguards they should put in place. So general media expertise is what they were looking for from me, and enthusiasm, I think, for those titles. They were, BBC Gardener's World, BBC Music, BBC History. It's not hard for me to love all those titles, and I still read them all.
And so we get to 2006.
Right.
You've been chair for 3 years of PhD.
Yeah.
If you include deputy chair, 6 years. You're in your 50s at this point. What are you thinking about in terms of life and career?
I'm thinking we've got a succession team in place. I should bugger off, really, and let them do it. Not really. No, I was thinking, gosh, is this the time when I should now leave PhD? It's going to be in fantastic hands. I'm not quite sure what I'm going to do with myself, but I'm sure I'll find some charity who'll want me to sit in their board and make helpful comments. When I got the call to say the TV companies think you might like to do this thing, which is to set up a central marketing body. So I think I'd been one of those people sitting in a media agency, sending irate emails off to people in TV companies saying, what the hell are you doing? Google's just published this ridiculous report saying blah, blah, blah. Is nobody in TV going to respond to it? Because it's absolute nonsense.
And just give some context of the time at this time. What was happening and what kind of things were Google saying and what was going on?
Oh, it was very much the era of nobody watches ads anymore. All ads are skipped on TV. Nobody's going to watch TV anymore because they're too busy on YouTube. Nobody's going to buy any TV advertising. It was the whole business. The internet is killing TV.
Right.
Yeah. So
typical scenario where new technology comes out or a new thing comes out and then suddenly everything else is irrelevant or going to die.
As I say, I thought of myself as an internet evangelist. I loved the internet. I just didn't. I was sitting in a media agency with all the data in front of me. Mm-hmm. I knew that was not true. In fact, I think in 2010, TV, those years when people were saying the internet was killing TV had never been bigger. TV had never been bigger. People had never seen as many TV ads at normal speed than the years 2000 to 2010, because that's the era when BBC was losing share to Sky was launching, lots of new commercial channels were launching. So actually TV advertising was growing at that time. So, and also, sitting with clients like Sainsbury's and British Telecom, you realise how valuable TV advertising is to them, how crucial it is to their business. So it just all seemed to me completely nonsensical. And much as I love the internet, a ridiculous hype. We came up, when Thinkbox got going, we came up with this phrase called number wanging. The internet companies just do this number wanging. They just hit you with X billion minutes viewed. And you think, oh, for God's sake, if we were to describe TV viewing in billions of minutes, it would, blow your mind. It's this ridiculous, completely ridiculous use of big numbers just to sort of confuse people. It doesn't give you any insight or understanding as to how people are behaving. So, I'd just been nagging TV companies saying, why the hell don't you respond to these people?
As in, put out a comment in the media and the press and respond to...
One of you, it doesn't have to be any one of you, but please, one of you do something. So, they then, I think, finally decided they should invest in their own marketing body. By the time Thinkbox was set up, the Internet Advertising Bureau was 10 years old. So, and in that time, they let all sorts of pernicious stories take hold, really, which took some rooting out and killing off, So effectively what they realised was needed was a body to market TV and TV advertising. Market TV advertising.
Market TV and advertising.
Yeah.
Because it didn't exist. It needed someone...
there was the Radio Advertising Bureau. So there was the mail marketing. There were other central marketing bodies for different media. But TV, for some reason, had decided it. Why would you need to sell TV, Everybody can see how brilliant TV is, which, of course, they should have done, but, everything needs a bit of help.
And to do this, you had to bring together all of these different TV companies.
Yes, so...
It must have been easy.
Yeah, it must have been
They must be all be friends and love each other.
Yeah, they really do love each other. Well, the idea of Thinkbox didn't come from the chief execs of the TV companies. It came from the commercial teams. So people like Andy Barnes at Channel 4 and Nick Milligan, the much missed Nick Milligan at Sky, they realised eventually that they could, by combining their forces, rather than each of them doing a little bit of research about one bit, if they pooled all sorts of resources, particularly research budgets, they could do something bigger, better, more authoritative if it came from the centre. But... and they were the people who rang and said, would you like to do this?
I see. Without
saying, oh, by the way, but you've got to go and persuade all the chief execs of the TV companies to come up with the cash. Because there's no point doing it unless you have several £1 million to do this properly.
They missed that bit out in the
Well, they did eventually tell me that I'd have to go and find my own budget. But as I say, I was in my mid-50s. I had enough money to live on it. Well, it wasn't like I was going to be destitute if it didn't work. And I really wanted it to happen. And although I thought they could probably find somebody better, somebody a bit younger maybe, eventually they persuaded me that I was the one that they'd like to do it. because, I don't know, they all knew me. I think they trusted me. I don't know. I knew my stuff. And it turned out to be absolutely joyful 40. I said, okay, but I'm only coming for 3 years, okay, maximum. Because, and I stayed for 14, so
Wow.
that's how much fun it was.
And you were effectively having to unify the industry to support
Yes.
it and promote it, and
Yeah.
which is what we're all about, actually, which is really nice.
Yes. And they are now brilliant at collaboration. So much, they've come such a long way. People say that actually the Earth will only get together when we get invaded by Martians. And in a way, TV only got together when we got invaded by external aliens, unnamed external aliens, and how much better life is. Obviously, they are competitive still, but compared to the early years, sitting around a board table where they really hated each other's guts, but they were doing it under duress because they knew they had to do it. It's so different now. They're so collaborative, and so many initiatives across the industry. And as TV is changing, as it embraces new technologies, Thinkbox has expanded to. I think the vision. My rule was, I'm only taking this job if you let me represent all of TV, and my definition of TV is not just linear broadcasting. It is anywhere that content is going to be seen, and however it's seen on whatever device. And I mean, back then it was minute, the other device viewing or other ways of viewing. But I thought it would grow, and my goodness me, it has. So, I wouldn't have been able to do it had I not been able to have my definition of television
How interesting.
represented.
And if in today's world, if I'm a business owner or a marketing person, a CMO, marketing director, listening, and I'm thinking, what's the point in TV advertising? What would you say to them?
I'd say go and look at some data. Do your own studies. One of the scariest things we found out was that if you're not a very big brand, often some of the online platforms offer to do your econometrics for you. That's funny, isn't it? So Google will offer often to say, let somebody come and sit in your marketing department and we'll do the analysis for you and tell you which advertising worked best. I think, I'm not sure you'd let ITV do that, so why would you let Google do that? So independent, robust, rigorous, effective research is what it's all about. And I think we all have to accept that smaller brands find that quite tricky, So, and there's nothing that can be better, the big generic pieces of research that Thinkbox and the Radio Advertising Bureau do to prove how their media work are excellent, but they can only ever give you a benchmark against which you can compare your own brand. But really, you've got to do that research for yourself. And you can then find out, oh gosh, we're more profitable than the average car in the radio market, or we're lagging a long way behind soap powders in this market. So yeah, I mean, in the end, however many minutes people spend online, however many minutes they spend, however many, clicks they do, in the end, it's does it work? Don't worry. People say, why are people fast forward through ads? Well, they do. Obviously, I do. But not all the time. People forget that they don't a lot of the time. And the BARB, which is the company responsible for measuring TV, and what they now call Fit for TV, so that would include certainly lots of bits of YouTube. They don't count anything that's fast forward. You have to be in the room. The sound has to be on, and has to be at normal speed. So BARB has incredibly rigorous hurdles for any medium to jump to be counted as a view. You have to watch. You have to watch the whole lot, not just to start. So trying to harmonise online video metrics with TV metrics is proving quite a challenge. But it's an interesting thing to do.
Yeah.
And then, of course, beyond that, that's just time. You then got to have a qualitative view of, would you rather be in Mr. Bates versus the Post Office, or Channel 4 News, or big Premier League match on Sky, or would you like to be in a cat video on YouTube? All of which is lovely. I love YouTube. I don't know what we'd all do without it. TV companies particularly, it's a great marketing vehicle, but it's just then trying to assess the qualitative difference between that environment for your advertising is important. So effectiveness, that's it. That's the one thing the job of Thinkbox was.
In December 2021, we get to the point where Channel 4 comes calling.
Yes.
Does the CEO, Alex, give you a call and say, "Hi, Tess, how are you?"
So I left Thinkbox at the end of 2020. In fact, Channel 4 vacancies came up in April the next year, but I didn't apply for them because, well, at the time, you might remember Nadine Dorris was running DCMS, and there was very much a feeling that, be careful what I say, perhaps people being placed in public institutions who maybe were not going to be troublemakers. Is that a fair way of putting it? I don't know.
Yeah.
So I thought there's no point me, avowed member of the Labour Party, me trying to join the Channel 4 board. So I didn't apply. But I eventually, in August, I think they said, the applications have closed, but you haven't applied. Why haven't you applied? You're free now because you've left Thinkbox. Why didn't you apply? I said, and this is not, Alex has nothing to do with who's on the board. This is an Ofcom appointment.
Oh, I see.
Ofcom appoints the board and the chair of the board of Channel 4. And their appointments have to be approved by DCMS and number 10.
Wow.
Which is why I thought there was absolutely no way I was going to get through that hurdle.
Well, let's just explain a number of things there very briefly. Ofcom, DCMS, number 10 is, people should know, but if they're outside of the UK, maybe not.
DCMS is the government department, stands for Digital, Culture, Media and Sport, and Channel 4's Channel 4 is sort of run by DCMS. Ofcom is the UK's regulatory body for broadcasting and telecoms and mail, I think, but not print, but a big regulator. So Ofcom appoints the Channel 4 board, but it has to get those appointments approved by DCMS, by the government, basically.
Right. So you got through all that?
Well, yeah, but so I was persuaded to, after applications, to have a go, but I had absolutely no expectation of getting the job. And then sort of, they didn't make a decision for 5 months or something.
Oh, wow.
But then eventually got a call.
By that point, did you think, well, it's not happening?
I'd given up, or, I'm obviously not, going to get it. But, yeah, I got it, and I was cock-a-hoop, I think.
Why?
Really thrilled. Well, because, if you're going to give up your time, you do get paid a little bit, to be honest. It's very small.
Yeah, a little bit. I would have thought it'd be
I think
decent
I can't remember. It's about 20 grand, something like that.
Oh.
It's, it's all right. It's going to pay for a couple of holidays. I'm not being, it's a terribly rude thing to say, isn't it? That £20,000 is quite a lot of money. But you don't do it for the money. You do it because this is something that's hugely valuable. And at the time, you might remember the government was thinking about privatising it.
Yeah.
Which is fair enough. I think you have to keep all options open. If you want to secure this valuable thing going forward, you have to permanently examine the basis on which it exists.
And what does that mean to privatise it? What were they?
It would mean to stop it being a publicly owned entity. Although it costs the country nothing, it doesn't cost the taxpayer anything because it pays for itself by selling advertising.
Right.
Completely self-funding. There was a worry, or DCS thought there was a worry that it might not be able to survive in the long term, and therefore it needed to sell itself to a commercial organisation, mainly in order to borrow money. It thought it needed to borrow money, which it was unable to do under the terms of its governance. And maybe that certainly was worth looking at. It was worth considering.
And it was very close to happening by the looks of it. I don't know exactly.
It was very, very close to happening. Amazingly, though, we got, I mean, and as I say, I really did have an open mind, because I think you are obliged to have an open mind. You have to look at all possibilities. But I think DCMS was never able to articulate what exactly it thought was going to come. If you wanted, they kept saying, we want to keep the remit, we want to be innovative and disruptive, and we want you to support the independent production community. If you want to keep all those things and put all the profit it makes back into content, so you're not paying shareholders, if you want to keep all those good things, who on earth is going to want to buy you? They're going to want to change something.
Yeah.
Otherwise, why buy it? And amazingly, the entire advertising industry, including ISBA, all the advertisers, came out very vocally saying, "You're crazy. What are you trying to gain?" So there's very, very strong support to maintain the status quo, because from an advertiser's point of view, they spend money with Channel 4, and it's a virtuous circle. All the profit it makes one year gets reinvested then in content for the next year, and you don't have to pay shareholders along the way. But I think some good things, a few good changes have come about, particularly as I talked about earlier, the ability to possibly invest in an own IP, own copyright, own some of the amazing programs it produces that then go around the world and make a lot of money for the independent production company. And why not? Channel 4 has put all that investment in at the start. It's made somebody some money. So I think the idea that Channel 4 could keep some of that money to ensure its future is a good thing to think seriously about.
Sounds sensible. What is the role of being a non-executive director at Channel 4? How do you pop in once a month and go, how's everything going? Good? Or how does it work?
It's quite hands-on. I mean, we get daily clippings, and if you can imagine how many things are written about Channel 4 every day.
Wow.
So just reading daily clippings, which I'm quite conscientious. I read everything.
Wow.
And so there are monthly board meetings, and I also sit on the remuneration committee. So that's the committee that decides salaries and bonuses and stuff like that. So there are subcommittees, audit and risk, and there's an ethics committee, and but you're there to ensure the future of Channel 4. So you're there to approve the strategy of the executive team, input into that strategy, ensure the organisation has got the right people running it now and in the future. We have a regulatory duty to ensure Channel 4 can survive as non-execs. So it's a huge responsibility.
Wow. So that's one thing on your shoulders, to ensure that Channel 4 does not go bankrupt.
Apart from normal non-exec, you have to make sure that the books balance and that the accounts are right. But beyond saying this year's P&L is okay and numbers all add up, what's happening now that can ensure Channel 4 can survive long term? So, but general non-exec stuff is all about governance and support and challenge, as you can imagine. And I sit with some wonderful other non-execs.
How many are there?
There are now 12. We've been living with only 7 for a while. It takes, for some reason, Ofcom and DCMS a very, very long time to appoint new non-exec directors. And I'm delighted to say one of the new non-exec directors is Dame Annette King, who was the chief exec of the Publicis Group. You haven't interviewed her yet.
We haven't, yes, but we should do.
I think you should.
That'd be very interesting.
It's very nice to have another advertising. I'm the only advertising person. I was the only advertising person on the board, which seems a bit odd for an organisation that relies hugely.
That's how they stay
90%
alive.
of its income from advertising. So it's lovely to have Annette there. But there are some other wonderful people. Sarah Sands used to be the editor of the Evening Standard. Other people who represent sports rights. Dawn Airy, other production people, creative people, business people. So our chair is Serene Cheshire, who was the chief exec of BT. And very brilliant businessman.
And just break it down how it works. So the 12 of you meet once a month.
And sometimes we have interim little Zooms little, if it's an issue, we might need to debate.
And how long, that once a month, how long is the meeting? How long do you meet for?
That's probably half a day and a bit.
Oh, wow.
And then we have a strategy day every year, whole day, maybe 2 days of strategy, where we all input into the strategy. We get all the clever strategists at Channel 4 put in data, and we debate it and hopefully shape how they plan for the future.
And what's the agenda of those monthly meetings?
Well, you can imagine how an organisation as large as Channel 4. So 1 month, every year, every meeting obviously is finance. There's people, there's programme performance. But the latest one, we looked at the whole sustainability issue of Channel 4, how seriously the industry, the TV and film industry, is trying to change to reduce its impact, carbon impact on the world. So we had a massive report on that. Another month, it might be looking at new channel launches, channel folding, new distribution strategies. So you can't do everything in great depth every month, but the basics, performance, finance, people is there.
And when you get onto the topic of finance, what exactly are you discussing and looking at?
Basically looking at the balance sheet, looking at the P&L. Can we afford, what are our reserves? Are our reserves big enough? If you're largely dependent on advertising, the state of the market, you're enormously subject to those fluctuations, the positive and unfortunately the negative ones. And having lived through 2023, which was a shocker of a year, which has inevitably led to difficult decisions on staffing levels at not just Channel 4 but lots of other media organisations. That's one has to make sure you don't eat into. You can afford to run at a deficit for a year or two because you've got reserves, and you're not trying to make a profit. So if you think this is a short-term issue, it's no problem running it with a deficit for a couple of years, but you can't afford to do that forever. You have to make changes. So forecasting future ad revenue is a hell of a responsibility, because out of that come all the other plans.
And who from Channel 4 is in at these meetings, or is it just the non-execs there?
No, obviously we are holding the executive team in a way to account. So Alex herself, the CEO, is at, and also Ian Katz, who's the director of content, ex-Newsnight editor, ex-deputy editor of the Guardian Observer, a very, very lovely, clever man, and Jonathan Allen, who's the chief operating officer, and he looks after all areas from advertising revenue to relationships with government to mending the front of the building, which was falling down, scarily enough.
Wow.
The glass was about to come out. That's all fine now. It's all been mended at enormous cost.
If you're walking past, you're safe.
You're
don't worry.
safe. You're safe now. Yeah.
Okay.
But it's a wonderfully vibrant organisation. And if I had to summarise it, I wanted to be on the Channel 4 board to make sure Channel 4 News can continue to be 60 minutes of brilliance every night, or most 4 nights a week, 30 minutes the rest of the week. That voice, that different journalistic voice, is so vital in today's world of crazy news and false news and deep fakes, etc.
And can you think of an instance where you've had direct and significant influence into a decision that has helped the organisation?
Well, I can't say too much, too specifically, but you can imagine that because my stock in trade is media performance, interpreting numbers, I love a number. Although I have to say, Alex Mahan does too. She is a PhD, a physics PhD.
Wow.
So she's one extremely clever woman. So she and I absolutely eat up data. We love it. So balance, trying to anticipate future changes is in media behaviour is a big part of writing a future strategy. How quickly are people going to turn to streaming?
Yeah.
Are people is the next generation going to completely give up TV sets? Are they only ever going to watch TV on a mobile device? I suspect not. But, so trying to forecast media behaviour, and that's one particular area, I think, where I think I've got a particular expertise, having seen change and I think anticipated change. I'm making the best of change. There are all sorts of incredibly positive things about the move to streaming. If you could imagine all the things that internet advertising used to laud about knowing exactly how to target individuals, TV companies can now do that on their streaming platforms. So because it's all first-party data as well, it's not inferred data. So you have to sign up if you want to watch Channel 4 streaming. You have to be signed in. Same for ITV, and so we know who you are, we know where you live, you know what age you are. So in terms of targeting, television delivered through IP is an enormously positive step forward versus linear broadcasting. Although, don't write that off too soon. I mean, streaming can still deliver linear TV. It can still deliver a schedule. It's just coming through the internet rather than through aerials and cables, and because people still want fixed points in their day. It's really interesting, isn't it? People, say on Apple TV, people will organise a watching. So we all want to watch the latest, Beef or whatever the latest new, Stranger Things on Netflix or whatever. We all going to watch it at the same time because we want to talk about it. Yeah. So that need to have something sort of live is not going to go away just because it's being delivered by streaming.
No.
And sport, sports.
Sport, the ultimate lie. I mean, it has to be sport, yes. And, I'm still bruised after Sunday's match against Arsenal, so... Yes, not watching it live would be very, very painful. Yeah.
That's very true. Like, I remember we moved house the start of last year, and it's like, where's the TV area? We couldn't find the TV area, but we're like, it's okay, we've got the internet.
Yeah.
Like, plug in the TV or connect it to Wi-Fi, and then you have all the apps. Again, you have your 4 and you have all of these things, and you're able to access the same thing you would need an aerial for.
Yes. The important thing for public service media companies, I call them that rather than broadcasters because they're more than just broadcasters, is having prominence. And that's one thing that the new media bill hopefully will set in stone. So, again, I happen to have Sky Q rather than Sky Glass. And until last couple of weeks, the Channel 4 app was not on the lineup on Sky Q. So there was iPlayer. Eventually, ITVX came along. Then there's Netflix, and no Channel 4 at all. Now, thankfully, Channel 4 is there as a streaming app with prominence. You have to put public service broadcasters in front of people because it's good for them. It's like, I keep saying, it's like making people eat their peas. You've got to make sure people eat their greens, or at least have their greens offered to them.
Being on so many boards, you've obviously seen many CEOs through your time. What makes a great CEO in your eyes?
Great question. Love that.
Well, I think clearly they have to have a vision for their organisation, and they have to be able to communicate it. You can have the most wonderful vision in the world, but if you can't make people who work there understand it and also be enthused by it, so to be able to motivate people to want to achieve that vision, that's the key thing. So that's the out in front bit. That's the sort of leading the troops bit. But I also think there's another CEO requirement, which is to I would call it coming round the back with the broom, to be aware. If you're not aware of what's happening in the IT department, you have to try and be everywhere a little bit and sort of see where something's about to break. And then sometimes you do that through other people, but you have to be aware that those seemingly small tasks can really matter and can really affect the performance of an organisation. It might be because the heating's terrible, and so people don't want to come into the office. I mean, it's as banal as that, potentially. So you do have to be sort of all seeing, all hearing, all listening. So you can't just be out in front. You've got to be round the back, in the bins, seeing the stuff too.
And what came out recently was that Channel 4 would be leaving its home for over 30 years. What are your feelings about that, and what were your opinions on it about moving
It's
out
just
there?
a building. I mean, it's a beautiful building. Somebody will buy, and who knows, it might not even happen. But you'll be aware that Channel 4 has moved its head office to Leeds. So its head office isn't in London anymore. It has a 60-40 work policy, so people are only in the office 3 out of 5 days. And more jobs are being created in the regions. They have offices in Bristol and Glasgow as well as Leeds. So you should never get too sentimental about a building, I think, as long as the building doesn't get destroyed, because it is a magnificent building. But yeah, if you can do something wonderful and constructive with that money.
Is that part of the role of being a non-exec is to help with these types of decisions, because you're supposed to be independent, and how did you sort of help with that?
It's absolutely clearly one of the possible roles of a non-exec is to, if we're there to secure Channel 4's future, and clearly a move into creating Channel 4's own content and having IP requires investment. Where are you going to get that money from? And if you're not a privatised company and you can't borrow it, what assets do you have that you can realise? So yes, that's what non-execs do. They help executive teams come to what might be difficult decisions. But I have to tell you that the executive team at Channel 4 makes all the right decisions. Well, by and large, makes all the right decisions without too much input from the NEDs. What they need is support. They need their ideas to be tested. Mm-hmm. Sanity tested, reality tested, and then supported if they're the right ones.
You talk about something you're known for, being someone who tells the truth, and you talked about the importance for any leader at any stage or anybody in the company to talk about the things that maybe talk about your business's weak points, or the areas you're not strong in, or the areas that you're still working on. Can you just describe that and of why that's important and your advice for leaders on that?
Some people sometimes tell me I share too much. I think that comes down to being brought up a Catholic and being made to go to confession from the age of 7, where you have to think up, oh my God, I must come up with some good sins. Otherwise the priest is going to be very, very bored.
Does that also mean that in the week you're working out, what good sins can I do? Because I've got to
let's get some good sins under my belt. That's usually, I was far too proud playing that Schubert impromptu at, assembly or whatever, something pathetic. I was a bit mean to my sister. Although I'm never mean to my sister because she is the most adorable person in the world. But it's also something Jeremy Bullmore, who you might have heard of, a great advertising guru who sadly died last year, said, is that if you tell people the bad bits about your whatever it is, then they're more likely to believe the good bits when you tell them those bits too. And as part of my business, when I talked about selling, that actually you should only sell things that are going to be good for people. So part of that is saying this bit of what I want to sell you is going to be really good for you. That bit might be a problem. That bit might not work. Because that's also a way of managing expectations, I think, if you tell the truth. So, and also you can sleep at night, It's just as selfish as that.
Love it. Very good. And another great lesson in terms of life and how to perform at the highest level. Tell us about how you set targets publicly.
I think setting targets for yourself is crucial, particularly if you're like me. If you know anything about Myers-Briggs, I'm an INFP, and the P bit means you're a prevaricator. So by committing yourself publicly, you make yourself do something. Otherwise, I probably would never do something. So I often, I mean, Lindsay Clay, who's the current chief exec of Thinkbox and a wonderful, wonderful person and a great colleague, and couldn't have done anything without her. But she would say, my God, you just committed us to do that in 6 weeks' time. How on earth are we going to do that? But that's how you, by making that target public, you then make, obviously you've got to be careful because you might overstretch and over stress that organisation. But as long as you do it with a little bit of knowledge, I think public commitment to all sorts of things is good for everybody. You know, everybody in the organisation knows what they're aiming for. People know what to look out for, and it just galvanises you, makes you get off your arse. You know.
Mm.
Yeah. Well, lastly, we've talked a lot about your journey, and I should say this we've now come to the point where you got to the non-executive role at Channel 4, non-executive director role at Channel 4. Is there anything you're doing in terms of self-development that you're working on yourself now? Is there anything you're trying to do better at the moment?
You know, other than learning about AI, I'm slightly paranoid about all sorts of things. So sitting around a Channel 4 board, I always want to try and make sure I'm ahead of, or at least up to speed with, the big issues that are going to come around that table. So, yes, I do try and make myself learn things. But other than that, I'm not quite sure what you mean. I'm writing my 4th very bad love story, if you want.
Great.
Which is not, I have to say, not part of a trilogy, which is a nightmare. Why on earth did I do that? Is not set in the past, in a country I've never lived in. So it's a contemporary story about a supermarket worker and Syrian refugees. So
wow.
Watch out for that. Yeah, so I mean, I have a very full and busy life. Is that what you mean? So I have projects.
Oh yes, it's. I think you've answered it in terms of What are you in terms of working on yourself? What are you doing at the moment?
I see.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's called Safer Shores, but it'll probably be another 6 months before it's finished. But
Okay.
it depends. It's a balance between my gardening, which I'm obsessed with gardening. If it's raining, I write the book. If it's not raining, I'm outside. That's the way it works.
Whatever the weather, you've got something you enjoy to do. Yeah. And people can find the books that are currently out, the Beethoven series, on Amazon, right? And
They can, yes.
And other bookshops. What do they search?
If they just search for my name, they'll find
Tess
they'll find
Alps.
and all the £3 per book will go to breast cancer now,
I love that.
Excellent.
in memory of my mum, Kay.
Lovely. So people can just search Tess Alps book and they will find it.
They'll find it, yeah.
We've come to the end of the story, end of the episode.
Yeah.
What fun it's been. Gosh, I didn't realise. I hope too many people don't take too much stock of my experience in corporate life, because I'm lucky that it's all turned out right, but it might not have done.
Well, it's been great to sort of bring out the wisdom that you have learnt through your experience in organisations, and there's loads of gold in there for people to learn. And so we'll get to the final poem in the moment, which I've been writing as we go.
Amazing.
And I think, one thing people can draw from your story, like you said at the start, that it is never too late.
Absolutely.
It is never too late. If you want to learn something and learn a new skill, if you want to change industries, change company, change anything, it's never too late.
Yeah. I tell you what, it's never too late, even if you don't succeed, because you get something out of trying. You learn something changes. So just have a go. I really believe in that. Never too late. I haven't taken up unicycle riding, but maybe I should,
There you
Why
go.
not?
Never too late.
Never too late. There we go. See Tess Alps on a unicycle soon.
Watch out. Wide berth, I think.
Tess Alps on the Alps on a unicycle.
I am actually going to Switzerland.
There we
this
go.
year. I've never been to Switzerland before, can you believe? I've never been to the Alps,
Well,
but we are actually going.
Oh,
In
Tess
July.
Alps.
Never
in the
too
Alps.
late.
Tess Alps in the Alps. Never too late to go to the Alps.
There you go.
Tess Alps squared.
We've got this is a TV show coming. Tess Alps in the
Yeah.
Alps.
And my husband is 6'5" as well, so he's always people taking the piss out of him for being very, very tall,
Right.
like mountains, and
Yes.
he's never been either. So
Wow. Okay, off to the poem.
Here we go. Thank you for sharing your life with us today. It's been great, very insightful and inspiring. From community to agency, carrying viewership to the masses. Media placement, informed advertising, promoting slogans that could be considered classics. Being behind the scenes while affecting change, the key to being an effective and valued chair. To setting up a central marketing agency to unite the TV companies to work together on a collective mission that they could all share. To help an industry thrive, inclusivity is the key to success. And if you don't evolve, you may become extinct fast. And that means lost earnings, lost opportunities, and stress. With such a wealth of expertise, who's to guess what we see next from Tess? Could it be AI novels or unicycling? We can't wait to see what she will bring next.
Thank you, Ashley. That's very cute, very funny. I promise not to take up recycling, but I do fancy pottery, actually.
Ooh,
There's a great Channel 4 programme called The Great British Pottery Throwdown. Have you watched it?
Yes,
very,
it's great.
very seduced by that.
Wow.
Might be pottery.
How did you get unicycling so quick?
I know, that was
We just spoke about that.
That's the magic.
magic
Skills.
Of poet magic.
Serious skills. I want to see Ash doing a poem on a TV show. That would be amazing.
Wow. Never say never.
Never too late.
It's never too late.
Never too late.
We'll end on that. Thank you very much.
Thank you
Tess.
very
Thank you,
much.
Charles. Thank you, Ashley. It's been great fun.